Beautiful. So let's recognize that it's a beautiful performance. Zach is a very remarkable cellist. He's 16 years old. He goes to school in Philadelphia. And once a week, he gets in a car with his parents and drives 6 hours to come to Boston to play in the Boston Philharmonic Youth Orchestra. And then he goes back to Philadelphia at the end of the rehearsal. So I've just been auditioning about 200 people for the Youth Philharmonic Orchestra, and an enormous number of cellists, a frightening number of cellists. And all of them had to play the slow movement of the Brahms Second Symphony, this melody from the Brahms Second Symphony. And I thought, why not take some moments to look at that solo, which every cellist has to prepare for their auditions, and see whether there's anything we can do to make sense of it, to make it more beautiful. And so I invited Zach to be a guinea pig, as it were, to look at the Brahms. Should we do that? Now, the thing that the audition panel or the auditioning committee are listening for is intonation, which you're very good at, beautiful sound, which you're very good at, and following the dynamics. Those are the main things. And based on that, I think you would do a very good audition and you would be highly commended and no doubt get into the orchestra that you were applying for. And the question is that all there is? Now, the first question is, the first note, is it a downbeat or is it an upbeat? It's the highest note in the phrase. So if you were to sing it, right? It sounds as though it's a downbeat, in which case it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But that's not what Brahms wrote. What he wrote was tired, because the F sharp is on the upbeat of the previous bar. So how are you going to suggest that? You have a bowing, which you inherited from the score, which is which makes the third note the heavier one. And I heard it maybe 30 times over the last days, and everybody went but that's not what Brahms wrote, right? So the first question is, do you have to follow the bowings that somebody put into your part? The answer is no. All right, so now what bowing should we do in order to get You could start with an up bow, which would be very dramatic. Let's try that. Now, Brahms wrote a slur over the whole thing. So at the moment what we're hearing is da, da, and that sounds too separate. So one thing you could do with an orchestra is have everybody do a different bowing. And in the old days, they used to do that. They didn't worry about bowings. And how do we know that? Because in those days, the parts from which they play, which exist still, have no bowings in them. Isn't that interesting? All the modern parts have bowings, but in Beethoven's time, there's not a single bowing. Isn't that interesting? So everybody did whatever they felt like. So you could create the illusion of making it one bow by playing Try that. Right. When I was a cello teacher many years ago, I had a student who was 8. And he played the cello very nicely. And one day we were working and he said, why does the bow go up and down? Because music goes round and round. Why don't you have a bow that goes round the back? He said. And I thought, what a wonderful idea. I've been looking all these years for a bow that goes around the back. So could you create that illusion? And I don't care what bow you use. Now we're still getting da 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 da. Good. It was pretty good. And when you have a whole lot of cellos, we could probably make it even more legato. Now the first phrase, ta da dee da dum, ta dee da da dum. They match each other, right? So the first one asks a question, and the second one gives the answer. 2, 3. Beautiful. Was that gorgeous? It was gorgeous. And what's beautiful about that is you say these two phrases belong together and they don't belong with what happens. They're completely separate. Now, poco forte is the marking, which is not piano. Poco forte is small forte, in other words, less than forte. So can you get a little bit more, a little bit more intensity in the left hand? One thing I wouldn't do is da 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 da, because that's an end, isn't it? Da dee dee da da. Left hand. Now that's very awkward to end on a down bow. Isn't that awkward? Brahms left us a very difficult task. He just wrote a slur. So I wonder whether we shouldn't go back to so use more bow, but make it very legato. Let's try that. Good. The only thing I would disagree with is the glissando you make between the two phrases. Da, 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 da. Ta, a breath, take a breath, and ta, dee, da, da, da. 2, 3. Now, that was very beautifully done. I don't care what bowing you use in the audition, right? The conductor will decide, but that brings the phrase very beautifully to life. Now, da-da-dee, go from there. Right. Now that phrase is a very simple idea, and you're playing da 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 da. Nobody wrote music like that, right? So da da dee da dee da dee da dee da da dee da. Look how it's phrased. One line. Just try that. Right. Can you avoid da 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 dee rather? Just play this. Da 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 da. Beautiful. Do it again. 3. And now add a note. 3. Good. You did that slightly slower than when you did da 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 da. Try it. Yeah, it's still notey, and I don't think Brahms liked notey. He liked line. Just try that. Good. Now that phrase ends, right, completely. And now so do from there, right? Good. So that was beautiful. Isn't that beautiful? It's like an arabesque in dancing. Just do it from there. And I'll help you a little. Right? Wow, that's exciting. Here we go. 2, 3. Amazing, amazing. Is that great? Now, I've heard maybe 30 performances of that in the last few weeks, and none of them played like that. Because they were focused on the sound, on the intonation, on the rhythm, and on the dynamics. Those are very, very important things. But that's just the beginning. That's only the beginning. Those are the elements. But the music is something completely different. For that, we have to know which notes belong to which. This is the crucial thing in music. You have to know which note belongs to what. What belongs to what, is one of the essential questions that a musician has to ask about every single note. Now, that first note, virtually everybody thinks that it's a downbeat. Or they bow it with 2 upbows, but that doesn't work because Brahms was fascinated by ambiguity. He took the highest note and made it an upbeat. He took the highest note, the strongest note, and made it the weakest beat in the bar, which creates a tension, which you have to bring out in the music. If you played that way in a traditional audition, what would the jury say? They'd say, but that's not the way it's usually played. He shouldn't do that. It's too musical, it's too interesting, it's too exciting. We don't want that. We just want intonation, good sound, rhythm, and dynamics. That's all we want. Everything else is useless. I say, poppycock. Every time you play a phrase of Brahms, you have to give everything that that phrase calls for. And that's what you just did. Now, it's dangerous to play that way because nobody else is playing that way. The 30 cellists who played, not one person even tried, including you. So now, am I going to advise you to do that? Yes. Because if the orchestra you're auditioning for doesn't like that kind of playing, you don't want to play in that orchestra. Well, that's going a little far because they may pay you very well. But, but it's a dilemma because the way that these pieces are played traditionally is not the way I think that Brahms indicated it to be played. Isn't that exciting? So now what are you going to do next time you're going to play that phrase?
Play it with heartbreak.
Play with heartbreak and with love and with arabesque and with all these different moods. It's amazing. It's one of the greatest themes ever written. Beautiful. Well done. Thank you.